One. And welcome to the Invest GP Committee meeting of December 5th. I'll call this meeting to order. On this committee is myself, Gladys Blackmore as chair, Dylan Bressie, and Councillor Palat, who is away today as he is not well, and Mayor Clayton. We do have a delegation today, so we will start by welcoming Scott Pravitz and Scott Roessler. You have the floor, gentlemen.
With Helix Engineering and Scott Pravitz with the UDI. So we're here on behalf of that group and the local developers, I guess, just to discuss the administrative report that's put forward regarding urban agriculture land use bylaw amendments. So a little bit preemptive, but I'm assuming everyone's read the report. Just wanted to go back a little bit to why this is here. Obviously, I believe it's in the report that we don't love the recommendation that's come forward. So I actually went back last night to rewatch the council meeting that the motion was brought forward from. In that motion, Councillor Bressie basically discussed options for bringing forward a discretionary use within the Ag district or the UR district for some kind of agriculture as a discretionary use on vacant land that was awaiting development. It was, I thought, was fairly clear. We liked the motion. In that motion, there'd been several discussions previously at many public hearings regarding rezoning to UR to allow farming to commence on vacant land. That motion went through 8-1. Councillor Bressie against, out of process principle, is what I would say. Now that, and I can let him, he hopefully can speak to that, but that made sense to us. We appreciated the motion as the intent was to make the process simpler and bring forward a different way of doing things rather than expensive and time-consuming rezonings. So the benefits from that, and hopefully I don't butcher Councillor Bressie's quotes, but he did in that motion say there was two benefits that he thought to this amendment or this motion, and the first one was that owners would benefit that they wouldn't require 2 rounds of rezoning, which is true. We have to take any vacant land, rezone it back to urban reserve, and then when development does proceed, we have to do that again, to bring it back to developable land. So obviously quite expensive, and in that process, we were talking about this yesterday, you could quite easily be up in the 6-figure range, like up to $100,000 to do that. Mostly because we probably wouldn't do a single rezoning. We would rezone it all back to UR and then piecemeal it up to, so every time we do that's about $10,000 to $15,000. So on a 5-6 phase development, that could get quite expensive. The second benefit was in vacant developer lands being kind of ready for market. So the developers may not proceed with the developments if rezoning was repeatedly a requirement, meaning, they were thinking about proceeding with a development now, knowing that they have to do rezoning. Having to do that might cause them to not proceed. So those were the two things that were kind of discussed in the motion. It went through unanimously. This kind of speaks to the city's desire to be an attractive place to build and reduce red tape. And we actually feel that this has been a fairly successful venture. I mean, I was in Edmonton last week and I had several developers down there talk about how efficient the city of Grande Prairie was, to be honest. So, and I do hear that quite often around the city. So, so that being said, that left here with direction to planning to bring back that option. We did get circulated with an urban agriculture land use, which Build reviewed, UDI reviewed. We had very minor comments on it. It was actually, we thought, fairly well written. There were some very small revisions. We sent them in. They revised the land use. Everything came back as we expected. And in our minds, it met the condition of the Bressie motion, which addressed types of agriculture that were allowed. So it eliminated undesirable uses, and I believe Councillor Blackmore brought that up, that there was some uses within the zoning that, such as intensive or livestock, that were not necessarily desirable next to urban development. So so this new land use did address that. And it was a use in all districts as a discretionary use, which was clear in the motion to avoid costly rezonings. So this happened, I don't know, over the last month and a half. And in our opinion, this is exactly what is presented in option 2 in this report. So, you know, looking at the alternatives, so there's the recommendation and then the 2 alternative options. Option 2 is the one that was what we understood was the intent of the motion. That was, everything was good until Wednesday of last week when we heard CLT revised the plan to what is recommended today. So, so that was a bit of a surprise. We feel that the recommended option is a significant step backwards. The recommendation requires all of the exact same rezonings and time commitments costs that we have today. So it's definitely not an improvement from industry's perspective. It imposes further restrictions on the UR district. Not necessarily bad restrictions. There are some that are like, such as eliminating undesirable uses within that zoning. So, but it is further restricted. There's also additional costs and time now due to the required development permit within the committee as a development authority. So, so we've gone the opposite direction of what we had thought was going to happen here. We don't believe this was the intent of the motion, and we would hope that that's not where we end up today. The recommended option is more cumbersome, it's more expensive, it's more time consuming, and from our perspective, nothing about it is an improvement over what we have today. So our preference would be that committee has a serious look at option 2, which is what was thought was coming forward. This most aligns with what we heard from the motion of that day. The second option would be option 1, to just leave it the way that it is, maintain status quo, because it honestly is less cumbersome than the recommendation that's put forward. And the third would be to proceed with the recommendation, although it's not consistent with what we had thought was the intent. So there were a couple of concerns in the report. I am not a fire expert. There was and I don't think any of us are, so we'll leave that to the fire department, but there was a concern brought forward apparently from the fire department regarding fuel. The only thing that kind of struck a chord there is I think currently we still have a lot of fuel in these areas. So a green crop, I don't know, that would be more fuel than a bunch of weeds or naturalized area that currently we have to spray to be dead 3 times a year. So that's something that, again, I'm definitely not here to contradict the fire department. That's definitely not the intent. So, but I would like to discuss that further if we do proceed. So, the last comment that's in the report is the budget and financial implications. So, there's a discussion there about a potential revenue loss of $1.7 million. I did ask planning where that number came from. It's basically a worst case scenario, so we don't believe that likely that would occur. But if it was to occur, it does only pertain to lots that are greater than 3 acres. So any lot that exists out there today that's 3 acres or smaller would not have any tax implication. That's kind of outlined earlier in the report. The 1.7 does seem high. I couldn't quite figure out where that all came from. So hopefully if we do proceed, I'd like to have further discussion with administration over how that number was arisen to. And because this does only apply to kind of like fringe land that's basically ready for development. Most of the rest of the land is either currently being farmed or hasn't been rezoned yet. So it's, you know, there's some areas in the city that definitely are, I mean, we've seen the economy not quite pick up to where a few developers have hoped, but I don't think that painting them with a brush that they made grave errors in their judgment developing is necessarily the right thing. I think we still want to be, you know, a community that is promoting development within the city, buildings within the city, bringing assessment, making it easier. And to be honest, that is kind of the, you know, aside from this one thing, that is probably the reputation that Grande Prairie has across the province. So we'd like to see that continue. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Councillor Bressi.
Great, thank you, Chair Blackmore. No questions, but just since my vote and my motion were discussed, I think that those were definitely reasons I had that. But for me, another reason for it was protecting residents too, not just developers. In terms of I was worried about rezoning something that allows extensive recreation, extensive agriculture, and a solar collector and some of those other uses that I don't think that current owners want. But if this land doesn't develop in 20, 30 years, who knows who owns it then? And so definitely agree with those reasons, but just want to be really clear that there were also reasons to protect the nearby homeowners that I made that motion and that I voted no on that.
Is there any other questions of the delegation? Councillor O'Connor and then Councillor Bosch.
Yes, thank you for coming in, gentlemen. I think the main reason for going towards option 2 is you wanted to make sure that the land is productive until you could afford to go ahead and develop. Does this not help keeping down noxious weeds by farming it and keeping the noxious weeds down?
Yes, it would. We can do that today. So if the intent of the motion was to control noxious weeds, you know, we already have that ability. I think the reason that motion came forward is because it's a kind of a clunky process. Like today, we've got to apply for rezoning, complete the rezoning to get into a zone where agriculture is a use that we can actually do. So all of the logistics of having the opportunity to do agriculture, everyone agrees on that. We all think that doing, you know, Councillor Bressie's comment about protecting the residents and whatnot, we understand that. We 100% agree. Like there are things that are in the urban reserve zone that aren't necessarily great next to the residents of Royal Oaks. They're not really happening right now, or we don't see them, but we do see that there is an opportunity there. So that was why the urban agriculture option within, that's a land use, not like a land use within a district. So the intention here was to have that land use there so that we didn't have to amend bylaws in order to do it. So with that as a discretionary use, it would still allow committee to, or whoever the development authority is, would still allow them to have the opportunity to comment on it if there was anything that they didn't like. It allows them to still have an opinion on it, and you know, we kind of understand planning's perspective on this too. This is sometimes not a planning issue, right? I mean, it sometimes isn't a land use issue. So really the problem is the time and cost, like to just doing all these rezonings. So I think the intent was to come up with a process that didn't require us to come to council and to get the opportunity to farm. And the original proposal, we think, did that. The recommendation does not. We would be here more, actually. So,
at a greater cost. Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Bosch.
Thank you, Chair Blackmore. I'm wondering if you could just give some more clarity to, you're talking on behalf of the landowners. So from what I got from you, Scott, was 3 acres and less, there's no impact financially. What percentage is that? If there is, 1 million or 1.7 million, whatever that is, what percentage is there no impact versus extensive impact?
So I'm not 100% sure how the 1.7 was arrived at. So again, this happened on Wednesday of last week, so we didn't have a lot of time to discuss it. But just I'm also not a tax assessor, so but my understanding, and if you look at, I think what page it's on here in your report, it's on page 4 of your report, talks about the Municipal Government Act, and I'll explain it the best I can, and I'd be happy to be corrected on this. But any parcel of land that is 3 acres or less, the taxation is based on current market value. So if you've got a quarter section of agriculture, assessors are able and required under the Act to assess 3 acres of it at market value, and then the rest gets farm assessment. So basically what that means is any parcel that's 3 acres or smaller would not be affected by any rezonings because it gets market value no matter what. So the reduction in assessment that would occur because of an agricultural use would only impact lots that are larger than 3 acres and only the incremental amount of that lot. So if it's a 4-acre lot, it would be 1 acre that would get farm assessment, and the other 3 would still stay at market. So the one development that's out there that kind of falls within that, or that's a good example, it would be Trader Ridge. There's a bunch of empty lots there. Most of them are 4 to 5 acres. So if he was to farm most of that land or consolidate some of the lots, there's the potential that could have an impact. But on a quarter section like Arbor Hills or Royal Oaks, even the existing farmed field, the assessors are able to pick off 3 acres at market value today and assess that. So it actually wouldn't really affect that as long as use hasn't discontinued. So it'd be an in-depth look at how the 1.7 was arrived at, but and I haven't had the opportunity to look at that. So, but yeah, that's the intention of the 3 acres, and those 4 points are right out of legislation. So
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I'm curious too.
I'll go to Mayor Clayton, and then I will have a question after that.
Thanks for that. I just know our CFO had some clarification and wanted to get in the queue. So, and I would just suggest that this isn't an opportunity for the delegation to debate our administration. This is an opportunity for questions for the delegation and then questions for administration following.
Thank you very much, through the chair. So just, I guess, to answer some questions or to provide additional information on the 1.7 million. So we did look at vacant land within the city. We did look at those that are under 3 acres, but the ability to consolidate those would be an option. And it is, you're right, maximum exposure. So we are looking at if everybody took that option, then the maximum exposure would be 1.7 million in taxation. We have some very significant parcels that are taxed now in based on market in non-res that would have this opportunity and could result in significant taxation loss in our both residential and non-residential classes.
Councillor Blackmore, Chair Blackmore, can you tell? Actually, I'll leave it for the in camera. I'm good. Go ahead.
Okay. The intent for me at the time this motion was made was to stop spraying 3 times a year and start haying fields, as it seems to be a more appropriate use of vacant land. Should you have the ability to farm that land, tell me what are some of the things that you would do on it. Would you bring in cows, or would you just simply hay it?
Well, that would depend on the regulations. So it depends what the city imposes as a land use regulation.
If if the land was there and you could farm it, what would you do?
If we had free reign to do anything, it would be up to the landowner. So they obviously have to work within the land use
I'm asking
district.
you to speculate, Scott, on what you think would be the most likely use of the land.
Grain farming.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other questions for the delegation? Then seeing none, I will thank you very much for coming and move on to the agenda, which is an in-camera item. So I would ask for a motion to go in camera. Councillor Bressie. All in favor of that? And that does carry. So now I want to wait for a blue light, Jessica? Okay. And welcome back to the InvestGP committee meeting. Thank you for your patience. The next item on the agenda is service area update. I will go to Chief McEachern.
Thank you, Chair Blackmore. For our service area update today, I'll start with economic development. Under the rural renewal stream, we've had 535 candidate endorsement letters issued, 661 employer applications received to date, including 33 currently in the queue for review, and 438 positions available minus the endorsements. Between November 13th and 26th, we've had 9 new home-based businesses as well as 10 commercial businesses that have all received welcome emails from us. The Regional Workforce Partnership continues to work on the development of a marketing plan and workforce development initiatives, including a new regional website, which will be launched in 2024. We have begun the planning for the 2024 Growing the North Conference that's currently underway. Great lineup of speakers being coordinated. And just a reminder to anyone listening that early bird registration is now open for that. The team also participated in the Chamber Festival of Trees Mixer, the GPRTA AGM, and continues to coordinate with the province and other endorsed municipalities on refinement and knowledge sharing for our rural renewal stream program. In investment attraction, the InvestGP team joined the County of GP Economic Development team in an investment toward to better understand production and export of honey from the area to foreign markets. We want to send out a huge thank you to our county colleagues for including us in that opportunity. And InvestGP hosted a business roundtable to gather input regarding investment attraction opportunities. It's part of the work to build a comprehensive investment attraction plan in PitchBook to support attraction efforts in key sectors. We do have a few additional roundtables coming up on that as well. And in events and entertainment, the annual Christmas tree lighting in partnership with the Downtown Business Association had the best attendance since its inception of the event, with 1,500 residents in attendance. The Celtic Tenors played the Cardinal Theatre at NWP on November 25th. And the Events and Entertainment Department is looking to bring more events into the Cardinal Theatre in 2024. Comedian Jeff Dunham played a sold-out show at Bennett's Energy Centre on November 28th. And Stars on Ice is coming up featuring Elvis Stoico. That'll be at the Bennett's Energy Centre on December 12th. There are still tickets available for that, and it'll be a great opportunity for families to attend before Christmas. Our New Year's evening out celebration will be happening down at the Muskasippi Park on December 31st with fireworks happening at 10:30 p.m. And our Grand North Winter Festival is scheduled for January 12th and 14th. And just this morning, we were advised that the festival has received a $30,000 grant from Travel Alberta. And with that, I can take any questions.
I see no one raising their hands, so we can move on to item 4.2, which is the Sidewalk Patio Program. Chief Glavin, are you introducing that?
Thank you, Chair Blackmore. So administration receives requests for sidewalk patios on occasion. Currently, there is not a defined process for how to deal with them. We deal with them on one-off basis. We see this as a bit of a gap that should be addressed through the development of a program that would make it clearer and perhaps encourage more participation in sidewalk patios. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Zeal.
Has accommodated a number of sidewalk patios on public property. However, there is no formal process or design guidelines in place. Administration proposes to formalize the process by creating a sidewalk patio program. In the past few years, more and more cities have been creating sidewalk patio programs to make downtown areas vibrant and encourage people to walk around and help local businesses. Like previous years, this year too, our city allowed a business to set up a patio without a formal procedure in place, during the implementation of which administration felt the need to have a formal procedure which would clarify city standards for business owners, streamline the approval process, and administration would be able to work more efficiently with dealing with future requests. This project supports Council's strategic focus on innovative efficiency and economic readiness and has various positive economic and social impacts. Based on this background, it is recommended that Council direct administration to initiate the process of developing a comprehensive sidewalk patio program. Thank you.
Councillor Barresi?
Great, thank you, Chair Blackmore. I'm curious, if you were given this direction, when do you think we'd be done having a process in place? And mostly I'm concerned about, would it be in time for the 2024 spring-summer season?
Go ahead.
Thank you. The baseline study and the review and research has already started. So yes, it would be available for the next summer. Yeah.
Councillor Bosch?
Thank you, Chair Blackmore. For sure, I'm a proponent of this. My question would be, would this be allowable through the winter months too, if the business so decides to do a winter patio?
Go ahead, Joe.
Through the chair, one of the immediate thoughts I had is snow clearing issues. So I don't think that we've necessarily decided against it, but it's something we'd have to explore as to whether or not it's feasible. And my gut's telling me that if it were feasible, that maybe it's on a very temporary basis.
Right. And the business owner already looks after their own snow, so they would potentially look after it within the patio. There should be no different, right?
Through the chair, depending on the nature of the patio, if they're using a portion of the sidewalk, then your comment makes sense. But in the styles that we have seen where they take over part of the roadway, then that might not be feasible.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
But we can certainly explore that as development of the program as winter options.
Thank you.
I see Councillor O'Connor's hand up.
Yes, Joe, I'm just curious. A lot of them take down the patio in the wintertime, from what I understand. Is that not correct?
Through the chair, correct, yes.
Yeah, so the snow shouldn't be an issue if, and you deal with it on one-on-one, like what Councillor Bosch says, that if there's an issue there, then somebody would deal with it, correct?
Through the chair, so far everything that we've seen has been more of a summer type patio, and I believe Councillor Bosch just asked about wintertime options. So we haven't seen a winter patio, and in circulation for entertaining some of the summer proposals, we did get comments from transportation about making sure that the patio was removed mid to late October for snow clearing purposes.
Okay, thank you.
I will jump in the queue ahead of Mayor Clayton. There's a lot of cities around the world that are just as winterish as Grande Prairie, and they do patios in the winter as well. They go to efforts to make sure tables have heat sources, and it's a wonderful thing. So don't count out winter, is what I'm saying. Mayor Clayton.
Yeah, with that, I'd like to make a motion if you're ready for that.
Absolutely.
The Invest GP Committee committee direct administration to draft a comprehensive sidewalk patio program, including multi-seasonal options.
Councillor Bressi?
Great, thank you. Yeah, definitely supportive of it, although a little bit worried about the word comprehensive, depending on where that goes. I know my personal desire is I love these sidewalks. I know that there's been issues in the past of them getting delayed because they didn't know how to access the system, and I think having an actual process in place would be very good. I just really hope that when it comes to committee, comes to council, that there's a lot of flexibility in that for business owners to adapt what works for their business, and that we're not just very rigid with what comes in our place. But I'm excited about the idea of having a process in place so that they know how to start those conversations. We know how to navigate them.
And I would just add flexible as to the part of the city they're in, because geography changes a lot. Is there any further questions? I will call a question then. And that carries. So we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is urban agricultural land use. And I believe Chief Glavin is going to introduce that.
Thank you, Chair Blackmore. So Council directed administration to bring back potential land use bylaw amendments to allow agricultural use as a discretionary use on vacant land. Upon circulation, some concerns were brought forward regarding increased fire risk, subdivision development appeal board jurisdiction, and community engagement concerns due to lack of public hearing. As such, administration is recommending today a new definition of urban agriculture while requiring applicants to undergo a rezoning to align with the definition. Council's direction was to bring back land use amendments to allow it as discretionary, and we have done that as part of option 2. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Allison Downing.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I'll make sure that you can hear me. So, urban agriculture land use bylaw amendments. Council directed administration to bring back potential land use bylaw amendments to allow agriculture uses as a discretionary use on vacant land. Council previously approved rezonings for the purposes of allowing farming until the land is ready for development. Those are shown here: Trader Ridge, Royal Oaks, Riverstone, and a property at 92nd Street and 68th Avenue. In response to Council's motion, administration assessed potential impacts, including traffic and safety concerns, pesticide and chemical exposures, air quality and respiratory issues, noise and disturbance, odor and nuisances, and fire hazard. The recommended approach for urban agriculture involves adding a new definition and proposed regulations while maintaining the requirement for rezoning. The proposed definition of urban agriculture focuses on growing plants outdoors in urban areas and excludes livestock and more intensive uses. General regulations for agriculture include provisions such as prohibiting on-site processing and ensuring compliance with environmental and health regulations. This report also lists status quo as an option. This approach also requires rezoning like the recommended approach. However, it doesn't introduce a new definition which excludes livestock. The advantages of both these approaches is that they require rezoning, and that provides the most opportunities for adjacent property owners to be kept well informed. The approach also allows council to consider a list of factors to consider, which include the operation size, the impact on neighboring properties, the effect on infrastructure, the site history, and the presence of wetlands and waterways. Option 2 proposes that we designate urban agriculture as a discretionary use in all urban land use districts, with InvestGP committee serving as the development authority. This approach allows council committee to consider the same list of factors, which includes the operation and size, the impact on the properties, and the effect on infrastructure. However, the risks to this approach are that neighbors would only be notified when the owner would not be notified when the owner discontinues farming and begins developing. And it also provides additional appeal opportunities that don't exist with a rezoning application. In conclusion, administration recommends that the InvestGP committee direct administration to bring forward land use bylaw amendments to add the new definition, urban agriculture, while requiring applicants to undergo rezoning to align with this definition. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Downing. I will look at the committee for questions. I will go Councillor Bressie, Mayor Clayton, and Councillor O'Connor. You're out. Okay.
Great. Thank you. I'm sorry if I'm just having a slow day trying to track this, but can you walk me through a little bit more about one of the concerns if we go with this recommended option is we're still rezoning to urban reserve, which still has extensive agriculture as a permitted use, solar collectors a permitted use, extensive recreation as a permitted use. How or are we going to guard against those uses coming to place in these lands if we go forward with the recommended option?
Thank you, through the chair. We would have to amend the urban reserve district to add clauses that are very clear about when those uses can be used and when they can't. So it's possible to do. We will just draft the UR district amendments carefully when writing it.
Okay.
Mayor Clayton.
Thanks, Chair Blackmore. A question in agricultural activities can be incorporated into weed mitigation, is that correct? So if I had a field of weeds and I wanted to bale it, could I?
Thank you, through the chair. If the land use district doesn't allow the use of agriculture on the land, then you'd be in contravention of the land use bylaw if you were to do agriculture uses.
So if the weed inspector comes to me and tells me to mitigate my weeds and I tell him my plan is to bale what's there that is half grass and half weeds, would that be an approved plan by the weed inspector?
Chief Clavin.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. We'd have to get clear information from the weed inspector if that would be acceptable. I believe it still would appear as though it would be an ag use, but we'd have to confirm that with inspection.
Is there any other questions? From my personal point of view, I think that we're complicating the issue when the entire question to begin with was how to avoid spraying 3 times a year. And so while I will ask my committee for business, I'm not going to be supporting the movement ahead of this program. Councillor Bressie.
Great, thank you. I'm going to try a motion and see if it's friendly to committee. And it really is not asking for a further written report, but asking for some staff members to maybe be at a future meeting to discuss this. And I'd move that committee direct administration to bring back information about opportunities to allow for agriculture's weed control in the existing land uses and information about fire smart on agricultural land adjacent to residential. And just speak to this. We've heard today, hey, we need to hear back from the weed inspector what's permitted, what options are in the current rules. We've also heard some concerns about fire that I take really seriously, and I'd like to hear directly from our fire department to be able to ask questions and learn more about that. So I'm not asking for a further written report. It's just saying, hey, I think before we can make a decision on it, there's staff that we need either these folks to go and talk to and bring back more information for us, or just bring those staff directly. So I'm not asking for anything written. I'm just saying, hey, before we have this conversation in this committee, here's a bit more information I want.
Mayor Clayton.
Yeah, I think that motion is fine. I guess the other option could be that you could table the motion and ask Chief Clavin to bring back the appropriate subject matter experts for conversation, but motion works the same.
That would have been a less wordy motion.
But that's okay.
But our secretary's typing fiercely, so I'd hate to throw out that work.
There's no further discussion on this motion. I will call a question. Sorry.
Through the chair, I'm not sure if we should do this during the meeting, but if we could get more clarification on the using agriculture as weed control part of the motion.
Go ahead, Councillor Bressie.
Yeah, well, we heard, I believe it was from Director Glavin, but when we asked, hey, is there opportunity now, just say without rezoning, without any new rules, this can be part of your weed control plan.
So agricultural practices, such as farming, is what he's getting at.
And with without adding it to the bylaw.
Yeah, basically, I'm trying to figure out, do we need to touch the land use bylaw to allow agriculture for weed control?
I will now call a question. And that does carry, so we will see this back again at a later committee meeting. We have no issues of correspondence or other business, but we do have some bylaw and policy reviews, starting with 7.1, Rescind Policy 318. Chief Glavin, are you introducing that? Chief McEachern.
Thank you, Chair Blackmore. And I would just give Director Kim Pinnick an opportunity to set up. We have two policies actually that we are looking at today. The first one is to rescind policy 318, economic recovery, and reallocate remaining funds to the development incentives and grants capital account. And then the second part I'll also mention at the same time is Ms. Pinnick will address the barrier-free grant, which will stem out of reallocation of funds as well. And with that, I can pass it over to Ms. Pinnick.
Great, go ahead, Ms. Pinnick.
Good morning. The department is here today to bring forward two policies, Policy 318 and Policy 356. So the Economic Recovery Grant Program was set up in 2020 with input from the Economic Development Advisory Committee to support businesses who were impacted by the pandemic. It was developed to support businesses in the creation of employment and recovery activities, specifically related to the pandemic. And there were four streams actually under this: beautification and patio, local marketing, training, and the waiver of fee for drinking establishments, which applied to allow all ages to be in establishments during the day. The intent of these grants was to support businesses in the recovery from the pandemic, and in many cases, businesses are now recovered, and in other cases, we're facing a new reality as a business owner and operator in a post-pandemic world. We have seen lots of success through these programs. Many businesses have enhanced their marketing, their websites, their social media platforms. They have trained their staff and taken advantage of our grant and also the Canada-Alberta Job Grant in conjunction. The grant for patio and beautification provided up to $15,000 for projects, but the total spend on those capital projects was a lot bigger. And as a result, administration is recommending that we close all of the remaining grant programs under economic recovery and reallocate the remaining funding to the DIG capital account. Administration will also be bringing back some recommendations in the new year for council to consider related to funding and grant opportunities once we know the outcome of our application to the Housing Accelerator Fund.
Mayor Clayton.
Thanks. Ms. Pinnick, can you tell me, how is the subscription to the development incentive grants? How many people applied? How much money did we give out through that program?
So in total, the economic recovery grants had an original allocation of $475 to beautification and patio, $150 to marketing, and $100,000 to training. Barrier free was also included in that at $125 for a total of $850. We had 61 local marketing grants that were awarded. We had 54 training grants. Beautification and patio grants, there were 25 for a total of 140. Remaining in those capital accounts is...
Sorry, I see that information. The recommendation is that the money get allocated to development incentive grants. So those were very specific in regards to taking a facility, renovating it, increasing the assessment value. Tell me about the statistics on that program, because that's not in the report.
In terms of the project total costs?
Yeah. Like, how many dollars were allocated to development incentive grants, not local marketing, training, etc.? How many dollars were actually withdrawn for that projects? Because to my knowledge, none. There was none.
There was specific funding that was allocated under DIG under a separate capital account.
Right.
The funding that was allocated under economic recovery
No, and that's what I want to know is DIG.
is DIG.
Yeah, because the motion is that we reallocate this to the DIG capital account. And what I want to know is how well the DIG capital account is doing.
So DIG had 5 grant programs underneath it.
Yep.
3 of them were closed at the end of 2022.
Okay.
There is $743,000 left in that capital account. The only 2 remaining grants that are open are the tax rebate grants.
Okay. And how was subscription? Forget the closed ones because I'm assuming they weren't popular if they're closed. So the 2 that are left, how many people applied and how much money was moved through whether it's through the taxation, whatever, the 2 that are left?
The
$770,000 there.
that are left.
Yeah.
And that is closed. So that grant program is closed right now.
Okay, perfect. So if I just say, I appreciate the intent here. For me, especially based on the previous motion that council is interested in seeing more information on opportunities for patios, I don't support removing the beautification and patio grant remaining funds. I think if council through committee wants to amend this policy, makes sense to me. Rescinding it, I won't support. In particular, I'd be happy to modify it to only include beautification and patio. But I'd be happy for administration to come back with another suggestion. But at a minimum, in my opinion, that part of the policy should remain in effect. I'm happy to make the motion after other people have opportunity for questions.
Councillor Bosch.
Thank you, Chair Blackmore. I don't sit on this committee, but if this moved forward in this capacity, I would not support it. I am a huge proponent for the beautification and patio grant, especially if we get things, somewhat organized to put out summer or winter patios, for instance, or use it for beautification to their businesses. When we did the Small Business Week walk around, a lot of businesses were still interested in beautification and having a grant to do so. I just think the timing hasn't been in their favor, in my opinion. I think this next year to 18 months is just still a tough time with inflation and coming out of COVID. I don't believe we're out of the woods by any means. So for them to put their 50% in, I just think the timing is not conducive for them at this moment. But I certainly think that it will be well used in the future. So I would love to see that stay and in fact be changed so that we perhaps bring, modernization into it, like maybe digital signs or something like that. The training and marketing grants, even in that, I think people still can use it. We're not out of the woods yet, and business is tough. So if there's any opportunity to help out small business in small dollars, not millions of dollars, then I look forward to that.
Councillor Bressie, and then Mayor Clayton.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I definitely echo the at least the patio part of the beautification patio grants. I'm okay closing the other ones, but I'm curious. I've got a question about the restaurants and drinking establishments change of use waiver that's also part of this policy. Did anybody take us up on that?
I believe there was, through the chair, I believe there was one that took us up on that.
Thank you.
Mayor Clayton.
Thanks, Chair Blackmore. I would move that the Invest GP Committee recommend Council amend Policy 318, reallocate. Sorry, I got my calculator. I had it. $55,700 to the development incentive grants. So we're gonna amend it. Remaining the funds of 55.7 will go to the development incentive and grants capital account. And I think that once I see it, I think that should the amendment just leave the one classification of beautification and patio grants for 156.3, but I just need to see the motion to see if I think it covers my intent. So just give me a second here. Speaking to this, I just think that as council has heard on a regular basis, this is an opportunity for matching dollars. Businesses are invested into beautification there is opportunities, and I'm optimistic with the information that comes back from administration in regards to more patio opportunities, and with that we may see an increase of applications through the beautification and patio grants. So keeping that open, amending policy 318, which would keep only the beautification and patio grant portion of it open, I think would be valuable to our business community. Is the motion in there yet?
Before I call that motion to question, it seems to me that that the grants that have been most applied for are the ones that we're closing, and I'm confused by that. So prior to our next council meeting, Ms. Pennick, it would be helpful to me if you could email us the ins and outs of the DIG program, what money has gone in and what applications have gone out. Because I'm not convinced yet that we're actually that we're putting money in a place where people are accessing it. That would be helpful before we go to council. I don't need that today because I know that you just don't have that at your fingertips. Is there any other questions or debate on the motion? Councillor Bressie.
Great. I'm wondering if committee would be interested in also leaving in the waiver of change of use fees. That's something that's not actual money to us. It's something that is us foregoing revenue, but.
If you just want to word it clearly.
Yeah, so I would say leave only beautification patio program and waiver of change of use fees.
Okay, we'll give that a minute for that motion to come up, and then I will call the question. Call a question on that? It carry? There it is. It carries. So we'll move on to the next item, 7.2, barrier-free grant. Ms. Pennick, I think you're doing that as well.
Correct. Thank you. So the barrier-free grant was set up to support businesses making adjustments to their commercial buildings to enhance accessibility across the community. It's been very well subscribed. Administration has closed that because there is not enough funds allocated to that grant program to cover future projects. It does promote an inclusive community environment, and as a result, administration is recommending that committee consider an additional $125,000 to be reallocated to the barrier-free grant.
Look to my committee for hands. Councillor Bressie.
Great. Well, I'd be happy to make the motion that committee recommend council recapitalize the barrier-free grant with $125,000 from the General Economic Recovery Fund. Just speak to it. This is my absolute favorite grant we did. I was so excited when we passed it. I've been even more excited to see some of the projects in the community. I'm very passionate about seeing everybody being able to access all of our public spaces, not just publicly owned spaces. So I hope committee will support this, and I hope council will support this as well.
Is there any further questions, debate, or discussion? In seeing none, I will call a question. And that carries unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Pennick. Moving on to item number 8, outstanding items list. Chief McEachern.
Thank you, Chair Blackmore. For the outstanding items list, the only change we're recommending is number 1261. This has been addressed previously at committee, and with the housing strategy that we're currently looking at, CLT has felt that this probably can be removed from this item or from this list.
Good. Thank you, Councillor Bressie. Or Mayor Clayton.
Sorry, Chief McEachern, I don't know if I agree with that interpretation. Can we, I would like to leave it there for now. So if you, depending on your motion, then I can go from there.
I would move that we leave the outstanding items list as it previously was.
Thank you. Yeah, that works. Perfect. Yeah, if you're happy to amend it to Q1 of 2024.
Sure, so I'll say as amended then, but we'll know that that's,
Leave it there.
yeah.
Thank you very much. I'll call a question and please vote. That does carry unanimously. So this meeting is adjourned and we'll take a 3-minute break before moving on to the next committee meeting.